Hey friend, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. I am your host, Hope Plack. And if you've been here before, you know that I love talking about root causes, what's really driving the health struggles that so many women face today. And if you're new, I want to say welcome. Thanks for being here. But today we're going to talk about PCOS or Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. But before you tune out because you think this doesn't apply to you, I want you to hang on. Even if you don't have PCOS, this episode is for you because PCOS isn't just a reproductive disorder. It's a signal and an early warning system of the larger metabolic crisis we're living in here in the US. And the same root causes that drive PCOS are the ones that drive insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, weight struggles, and cardiovascular disease. And maybe you're a man tuning in, and that's great. I'm so glad that you're here. There is very likely a woman in your life who may be dealing with this. And so today, in this episode, we're going to break down what it is, and we're going to cover what PCOS is and what's happening inside the body, the symptoms and long-term health risks, so what to look for, how common it really is here in the US, why PCOS is so tightly linked to insulin resistance, and why the problem is getting worse and will continue to grow if we don't intervene. And finally, how you can actually turn this around and what that looks like inside the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course. So this is going to be an in-depth one. So if you are at home, I know a lot of you have said you listen to this while you're on your drive to work or while you walk your dog, but grab a notebook or, get your walking shoes on and let's get into this and let these ideas sink in. So before we get into it, though, as always, a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor, and this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor before making any major health changes. Okay? So now that we're on the same page, let's get into it. So PCOS stands for Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, and it's one of the most common hormonal disorders in women of reproductive age. But even that description, I think, really falls short because PCOS is not just about your ovaries. It's about your entire hormonal and metabolic system. And at its core, PCOS is a condition of hormonal imbalance and metabolic dysfunction. Women with PCOS often have elevated androgens, and that's testosterone and other male type hormones that women also make, just usually in lower amounts. So simply said, women have testosterone. We need testosterone, but women with PCOS have too much testosterone. Okay. Hopefully that's clear. They have insulin resistance, meaning their cells don't respond well to insulin. So the body compensates by processing more and more. If you want to learn more about insulin resistance, I just did an episode on that 2 weeks ago. They have ovulatory dysfunction, so their cycles are irregular. They may not ovulate consistently, and this can lead to fertility struggles. And then sometimes, though not always, their ovaries have polycystic appearance on an ultrasound, meaning they contain many small immature follicles that never developed properly into eggs. And so really the name PCOS is, I think, somewhat misleading. Not every woman has cysts on their ovaries, and it's not just an ovary condition. It's a whole body metabolic condition. And hopefully by the end of the podcast today, you'll have a really good grasp on that. So here are some symptoms you might notice and how PCOS will show up in real life. And again, if you are a man listening to this podcast, this is going to equip you if you have a wife of reproductive age, if you have daughters, if you have granddaughters, if you have friends. It's good to be able to have your eyes on the lookout because some of these things you can see externally on people that are signs that maybe they are dealing with PCOS and maybe they don't know it. So number one, periods that are irregular, unpredictable, or just missing altogether. That is a big sign. And, if you're a guy listening, the girls in your life probably aren't going to tell you unless maybe it's your daughter or you have a really open relationship like that, or your partner. But irregular periods or missing periods are a big sign. Struggles with fertility because ovulation isn't happening consistently is another big one. And we'll get into this more later, but a lot of women don't realize they have PCOS until they start trying to get pregnant. Skin issues like acne or very oily skin, again, are connected back to PCOS. Hair growth in places you don't want it. So think chin hair, upper lip hair, hair on your chest or your abdomen. I mean, you can really think about it. As I said, women with PCOS have high androgens, which are male hormones, testosterone specifically. Their hair growth starts to mimic that of a man. So hair growth on their face, chest and abdomen, but that also includes hair loss and thinning on their scalp. So if they're, growing hair on their face, their hair is getting thin on their scalp, big red flag that they have too much testosterone, likely connected to PCOS. And then the last one that I'll mention here is weight gain, especially around the midsection. Actually, I have one more. Is a big red flag. And then dark patches or velvety skin on the neck, underarms, or groin. These can be a direct sign of insulin resistance, which we have talked about, but also, again, another sign of PCOS. So these symptoms are disruptive, very frustrating, and often embarrassing. And many women spend years bouncing between, a dermatologist, a gynecologist, fertility specialist before someone finally connects the dots of what's going on here. And truly, it's very sad. I believe PCOS is becoming, or I should say, more and more women, I think, are becoming aware of PCOS as I think as a society, we're becoming more aware of our metabolic health and insulin resistance, blood sugar management, all of that. But this is a really important piece of women's health. And so I'm really glad that it's becoming more mainstream to talk about. Now, here's where I'm going to pause and really emphasize something. PCOS isn't just about fertility, but a lot of times it's talked about in that context. And it's not just about acne or unwanted hair, although those are really disruptive to our lives. It's really about your long-term health. And that, again, is what we are all about here at Lifestyle School is we want to be healthy for the long term. We want to have a lifestyle that gives us the health that we want and keeps us at the weight that we desire, right? And women with PCOS are at a high risk for things like type 2 diabetes. And the risk is 4 to 10 times higher compared to women without PCOS. So that is huge. So if you have PCOS, you're 4 to 10 times more likely to develop type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes, I feel like people don't always understand how big of a deal type 2 diabetes is. I've been nutrition coaching for a long time and, have people come into a consult with me like, oh, I'm pre-diabetic and whatnot. And, my husband's a physician and, he works in ICU, and really what, doctors say is type 2 diabetes isn't going to kill you. It's all the other complications and issues that it brings along with it. Like the specific high blood sugar isn't going to kill you. It's the infection that you get after surgery because you have so much sugar in your blood that your body can't fight off because it's feeding on all this sugar. It's your kidneys pooping out on you way too early, being on dialysis, and then eventually dying because from chronic kidney disease. And I will say a life on dialysis is not a good life. Like you spend hours and hours a day at a dialysis clinic. So if you have PCOS, you got to do something about it because 4 to 10 times higher likelihood of the developing type 2 diabetes is a really big deal that needs to be taken very, very seriously. Metabolic syndrome is also a huge risk with PCOS. It's the dangerous cluster of high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol, belly fat, and then high blood sugar. That is the trifecta for metabolic syndrome. Cardiovascular disease, including heart disease and stroke, is much higher for women with PCOS. And then endometrial cancer, because when you don't ovulate regularly, the uterine lining can build up abnormally over time. And that increases risk of cancer. And of course, mental health struggles like anxiety and depression, which are common when your hormones are out of balance and your body doesn't feel like your own. So this is why PCOS matters, because even if you're not thinking about fertility right now, maybe you're in your 20s, maybe you're not even dating someone, or maybe you're done having kids, and you think, I'll just deal with this, my irregular cycles later. Maybe I'll just let perimenopause take care of it. The truth is, your metabolism is being impacted right now. And the earlier we intervene, the better the long-term outcomes are. And as I said in a previous podcast a couple weeks ago, it is easier to stay out of trouble than get out of trouble, especially when we're talking about our health, because once things go bad, it takes more time, it takes more money, it takes more diligence, and you're coming at it from a place of already feeling horrible, discouraged, and generally not in typically a place with a lot of bandwidth, right? To take on a big health journey. So it's so much easier to stay out of trouble than get out of trouble. So how common is PCOS? Maybe you're wondering. Let's talk numbers. In the United States, it's estimated that 4 to 5 million women of reproductive age are dealing with PCOS. So a significant number. That's somewhere between 5 to 12% of women, depending on how you measure it. Although I would say a lot of people guess that it's much higher. Globally, the World Health Organization estimates PCOS affects anywhere from 6 to 13% of women. But here's the catch. PCOS is often underdiagnosed. Many women don't get a diagnosis until they start struggling with infertility. And even then, some are dismissed or misdiagnosed. And a large US study in 2023 put the prevalence at 5.2%, which means millions of women, are living with this condition, and maybe without even knowing it. So, there's some ambiguity with the numbers, but likely, more women are dealing with it than they even realize. And PCOS is diagnosed like via a cluster of symptoms. If you check like multiple boxes of those symptoms we talked about earlier, that's how it's diagnosed. So, I personally think it's very much underdiagnosed, but time will continue to health. So, will continue to tell. So when you hear me talk about this being like a big public health issue, I hope you agree that it's not an exaggeration. At the least, when we're talking about this, we're talking about millions of women and their families being impacted by a condition that is tightly linked to the broader metabolic crisis that's happening in this country. And that is something that I feel really passionate about addressing. And, PCOS falls right into this bucket of talking about blood sugar regulation, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. So I want to talk about connecting the dots between PCOS and insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is the common denominator in PCOS. Studies show that up to 70 to 80% of women with PCOS have insulin resistance, even if they're not overweight. And that's why I think it's always really important to have your insulin tested when you have your physical done, because insulin resistance is going to show up years before your pre-diabetes or diabetes would. It tells us where your body's going by how your cells are responding, and your pancreas is responding to your food and your lifestyle. Here's how it works. Your body pumps out insulin to keep your blood sugar stable, right? And then when your cells stop responding properly, insulin levels rise higher and higher to help get that sugar out of your bloodstream. Those high insulin levels push the ovaries to make more androgens or testosterone. And these androgens cause irregular cycles, infertility, acne, hair growth, and all the other symptoms we talked about previously. And truly, what this does is creates a very vicious cycle. PCOS makes insulin resistance worse. The insulin resistance makes PCOS worse. And together they feed into this like long-term metabolic disease cycle. And this is why I always say PCOS isn't just about your ovaries, it's about your metabolism. It's because it's a metabolic red flag that we should be paying attention to. So, why is this problem getting worse? Especially in the US. I think this is a really important question to examine, right? And truly, I believe it's connected to the rise in insulin resistance. Right now, about 1 in 3 Americans, adults have prediabetes. 1 in 3 American adults have prediabetes. Hear that. And most don't even know it. So if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't had your hemoglobin A1C tested recently, you need to go get it tested. And what your hemoglobin A1C is going to do is it's going to give us a 3-month snapshot, about 90 days of what your blood sugar has been doing. And it's going to tell you if you're above 5 point, I think it's if you're above 5.6%, you have prediabetes. Might be 5.7. I'm having a moment. But if you're right around there, like you're right on the cusp of prediabetes. And if you have prediabetes, you are on your way to type 2 diabetes. And it's not good. There's nothing good that comes from it. And you need to start paying attention to it. And you can 110% reverse prediabetes with your diet and lifestyle. I do it with my clients all the time. Granted, if you are prone to high blood sugar, to diabetes, insulin resistance, you got to be more intentional than the average Joe who's not ever been pre-diabetic or insulin resistant. But it's 100% worth it when we're talking about your long-term health outcomes and your weight. So there's millions of people out there walking around with high blood sugar and they have no idea. And the other huge red flag that we see in public health is that kids and teens are showing insulin resistance earlier than ever before. They used to call type 2 diabetes adult onset type 2 diabetes. This was even, I think, 10 years ago when I started coaching. When I first learned about type 2 diabetes, and I think I was an adult, I don't even think I knew what it was in college, before I started studying nutrition. And it was called adult onset type 2 diabetes, but they no longer call it adult onset because children and teens are more and more and more being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So it's becoming a huge problem. And then when girls develop insulin resistance during puberty, that sets the stage for PCOS symptoms in their teens and their 20s. And the underdiagnosis of it all, women often go years before getting diagnosed, meaning insulin resistance is silently progressing in the background, inching them closer and closer to things like pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes and all the other health complications that come with that. So really, I think this problem is getting worse at the end of the day due to a lifestyle mismatch. Our modern world is basically a perfect storm for diabetes. Ultra-processed foods and refined carbs are everywhere, right? In our culture that we've created, we're constantly snacking compared to 50 years ago. Like, you're not getting a snack, you're going to ruin your dinner. We're constantly eating in meetings, in the car, on the go, in bed, gross. And then, we are more stressed probably than we've ever been. It never seems to let up, and stress is going to drive our blood sugar problems via the cortisol pathway. And we're not sleeping well. We have very disrupted circadian rhythms thanks to technology, to phones, to not getting first morning sunlight. And then we have a very typically sedentary lifestyle. Maybe we get to the gym for like 30 to 40 minutes, like a couple days a week, but we're not getting outside and walking. We're not like movement isn't a normal part of our life. And all of these things are truly setting up the perfect storm for metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, and insulin resistance that's, in women drives PCOS. So yes, unless we change course, these problems as a whole are only going to get worse. And, that is why I started this podcast. I mean, I love geeking out about health stuff and our lifestyle and like how can we control the controllables in our life? And there's so many of these things, like we get to choose if we want to eat ultra processed food, right? Sometimes easier said than done. We can choose if we're going to snack all day. We get to choose a lot of times some of the stress that we allow into our life, right? Through people and commitments and otherwise. We get to choose when we go to bed, if we're going to get enough sleep each night, and we get to choose how much we move. And so many of these control like things are within our control. We just have to choose and educate ourselves and figure out how to change our thinking and set up systems in our lives that allow us to thrive, right? And that's what we're all about here at Lifestyle School. So I'm sorry, I feel like I'm getting a little preachy, and I don't want to sound like that, but I just feel very passionate about this subject. So bear with me, guys. So for the good news, when it comes to PCOS, and I want to be so clear on this because I don't want to just be like, okay, I got a PCOS diagnosis, I'm screwed. Because that is not the case. This is not a hopeless condition. There's no like single quote cure for PCOS. There are many powerful strategies that you can use to manage it. You can use to reverse insulin resistance and dramatically improve symptoms and long-term health risks. And really, that means making some drastic changes to your lifestyle. And, I kind of alluded to them like the opposite of what you want to do. But really, you got to start with your nutrition. You got to eat real, whole, nutrient-dense foods that stabilize your blood sugar and lower your insulin levels. Like, you got to get your insulin down. And that is everything we teach you in the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course is how to manage blood sugar and insulin levels with your diet. And, for everyone, it's going to be a little bit different, but that is a huge focus. And I'm really passionate about that because I was never diagnosed with PCOS, thankfully, but I have a family history of type 2 diabetes. And I've seen the consequences of that in people's lives, in my family. And I know I run insulin resistant is the way I like to put it, where if I'm not being mindful, like my insulin levels love to go high. And I just don't tolerate many carbs because of that. And so I just have to be really mindful about, types of food I eat, but everyone's a little bit different. And so that's what we talk about in the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course. And that is something I really focus on with clients in my 8 weeks personalized coaching program that we can do alongside of the Lifestyle School course. So nutrition is always the foundational place to start if you want to address issues with PCOS. Number 2 is movement. You have to have regular exercise, especially strength training, because your muscles are your biggest tool for improving insulin sensitivity because they essentially work as a reservoir for blood sugar. So like anytime you eat food, you increase your blood sugar. And that sugar has to have somewhere to go. And there's only really a couple places for it to go. It can go into your muscle to be used for later. It can go into your liver, or it can go into your fat cells, or it could just hang out in your bloodstream and require more and more insulin production. So movement is super powerful. Movement and strength training, you got to figure it out. Next is stress management. You would be shocked by how much I talk about stress management in my coaching. Some people seem to have like a good handle on it, and then other people, it's like all we talk about because high cortisol makes insulin resistance worse. And so you can't just changing your diet is going to have a big impact. But if you are someone who is like always super stressed, I'm sorry. You gotta figure it out. Um, and I did a podcast episode on stress a number of weeks ago. There is a researcher called Dr. Appel, Epel. I think I'm saying it right. But she did this really great book called The Stress Prescription. And one thing that I really appreciate about that book, and I did a podcast on it, she's a researcher at Stanford. She recognizes like there is some stress in your life you can't remove. You know, if like you have a sick child, if you're caring for a sick parent, if you're in a job that you can't necessarily leave, but is super stressful, like that is reality, but we have to figure out a way to coexist with that stress and not let it overtake and ruin our health, right? So, go check out that episode if you want the deep dive on that. But next up is sleep. We got to prioritize sleep. We have to prioritize our circadian health. Quality sleep is really a non-negotiable. And I think in the future, I'm going to do a episode on circadian rhythm because it's so important. It's such a big piece of this puzzle. And the more I work with my nutrition clients on their circadian rhythm, the more I'm like, wow, like this is a really big deal and how much it changes things for people. So I'm thinking about doing that here in the next couple of weeks. Supplements can be really important. So targeted nutrients, you know, things like inositol, vitamin D, magnesium, NAC can all support metabolic pathways involved in PCOS and insulin resistance. And then, you know, sometimes medical care is needed, especially if you're trying to get pregnant and whatnot. And so I'm always like, let's do every possible thing we can do before we do a medical intervention because, you know, a lot of times a medical intervention, while I'm so thankful for modern medicine, it doesn't like get to the root cause of what's causing the problem, right? It can operate as a band-aid in some cases, especially when we're talking about like chronic disease. And so if we're not doing these other things like our nutrition and our movement and our stress management, it's not going to fix the problem at the end of the day. So the foundation always comes back to our lifestyle. And that's why we're here at Lifestyle School for Weight Loss podcast, guys. I feel like I'm ranting, but I'm sorry, but we're going to keep going. So lastly, how do we address, you know, this kind of stuff within Lifestyle School for Weight Loss? I wanted to take a couple of moments to talk about that because I don't know that I talk about Lifestyle School for Weight Loss very much on here. So because whether or not, you know, you've been diagnosed with something like PCOS, the same root issues for most people are at play when it comes to metabolic dysfunction, the inability to lose weight. And really it comes down to blood sugar regulation, insulin resistance, and their metabolic health. So inside of Lifestyle School for Weight Loss, we really focus on 3 pillars. So nutrition protocols that are simple, flexible, blood sugar friendly. Really, I hate fad diets, gimmicks. We don't do really hardly any calorie counting, so minimal, if any. And my goal is for you to learn how food works with your body so that you can create a diet that, you know, you're not following a meal plan that I wrote for you, but you're eating foods that you enjoy and that love your body and your body, and like that you love and that you're, oh guys, I'm screwing this up. I want you to eat foods that you love and that foods that love you back, right? So that means they are blood sugar friendly. They don't leave you feeling bloated. They nourish you. They leave you feeling full and satisfied. That's what we're looking for. And everyone's diet is so incredibly unique. I shy away from trying to do like a meal plan. I like to give guidelines and then we go from there, right? The second pillar or tool in the toolbox we use is fasting as a tool. And I want to tell you, not all fasting is created equal, and I teach you how to do it strategically to lower insulin, reset your metabolism, promote fat burning, without burning yourself out or, potentially hurting your metabolism. We're very strategic about it. There's not a good like one size fits all approach to fasting. The more people I coach, the more I realize, there's like fasting mimic tools that we even use for some individuals, depending on a lot of different lifestyle and stress factors. And so, but it is a really important tool because fasting is the number one way to lower your insulin. And if insulin is driving these issues, we have to figure out how to get insulin down, whether you're dealing with PCOS, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, whatever. And then lastly, and I think this is so important, and frankly, I think missing in a lot of programs, but we talk about lifestyle systems a lot because habits don't stick unless your systems support them. And we work on stress management, sleep, exercise, and even things like, meal prep, time management, and really like how to think through this process. Pretty much every person I feel like I work with is recovering all or nothing person. And if you want to be in this game long term, you can't have an all or nothing mindset because like life will happen. You're going to fall off the wagon. Things are going to go awry. And if you're all or nothing, you're going to be like, wow, I'm a failure. I may as well quit. And it's just like, no, that's just life happening. It's going to keep happening over and over again. We just got to like roll with the punches. Like, okay, I screwed up. What did I learn from that situation? And then move on, right? Like take some like learning things from it and then carry on with life, get back to, what works and what leaves you feeling well. So I want to be clear. Like Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course and the coaching program is like kind of like an 8-week bundle. The goal is that you can get through it in about 8 weeks, about 2 months. But it isn't about short-term weight loss. I really would hate for that to be the legacy of it, of all the time and dedication I put into that. It's about creating a lifestyle that supports long-term metabolic health. And when that happens, our blood sugar stabilizes, our weight becomes easier to manage, our hormones come back into balance, and our energy returns. And I want to emphasize two things about like hormone balancing and energy. So some of the clients I work with, it's like very straightforward. We're going for weight loss, not a lot of other things going on. But I also work with clients who have a lot of other things going on that are just a little bit more medically, or just like from a life perspective complex, right? And a big thing that can come from working on our metabolic health is energy. I had a client who was like barely able to get off the couch most days. And we got this person to like getting to bed earlier, waking up earlier, having energy, gardening, doing the things they enjoy, spending time with their kids. And it was beautiful. And then there was another person I worked with who was having these insane hormonal headaches that took her out for like a week of every month, which, I mean, let's be real, that is debilitating. As a woman, that's like a fourth of your life, right? For those years where you're reproductive, in your reproductive window. And we were able, like her goal wasn't really weight loss. She wasn't an overweight person, but she through the process of working on her metabolic health, her hormones came back into balance and her periods got so much better. She was no longer laid out with hormonal headaches. And things have gotten better and better and better amongst other health things that she was working on. And so, I would hate for you to think it's only weight loss. What I like to tell people is, we catch people with the weight loss, we keep them with like how much better they feel, how much more energy they have, how much easier their, monthly cycles are, and whatnot. So, I've watched women inside of Lifestyle School for Weight Loss go from exhausted, very frustrated, and, stuck to finally feeling like they're in control of their health again. And I want you to know that whether you're struggling with something like PCOS, insulin resistance, or maybe you just want to prevent future health problems, maybe they run in your family, the tools that we use are the same and they truly, really work. And so, in closing, to wrap this up, I want you to know that PCOS, again, is not just a fertility problem. It's truly a metabolic problem. And as insulin resistance and metabolic disease rise in this country, we're not trending in the right direction. PCOS is going to continue to rise with it. And the story, though, doesn't have to end there because you are not powerless. With the right nutrition, lifestyle changes, and support, you can reverse insulin resistance, you can manage PCOS, and you can protect your long-term health. And if you want a proven framework, if you want accountability, if you want community, I would love to do this alongside of you. And I'd love to invite you to join me inside the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss and or the 8-week personalized coaching program that you can do along with that if you wanted to work one-on-one. So with that, guys, I just want to say again, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you found this episode helpful. I hope you found it inspiring. I hope you didn't find my heart being annoying. If you found it helpful, if you would do me the favor and share it with a friend who needs to hear this message, that is the best way for me to share get the word out about this podcast. And I just want you to remember, or actually before you remember, if you haven't already, if you could like and subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening. If you could leave a review, if you could leave me a comment, that also helps my rating in the system and the algorithm. I'm going to be honest, guys, I really hate doing social media. So if you could help the reach of this podcast, it would mean the world to me. And before I let you go, I want you to remember that small, consistent steps today create the life and the health you want tomorrow and in the years to come. So keep making those changes. I'm with you every step of the way. Take care, guys. We'll see you next week.